Over 60? Discover 4 incredible carbs you must eat and 4 surprising carbs you should never touch. Frank squinted at the worn newspaper as he sat in his usual booth at Benny's, the last of the mid-morning crowd spilling out the door. The headline screamed at him, making him grimace. He'd grown comfortable in the rhythm of daily routines. Pancakes on Saturdays, coffee refills from Rita as regular as the seasons. But today, the paper felt like a challenge, like a boxing match he hadn't prepared for. His fingers drummed a restless beat on the table. He hadn't had an easy time since his kids moved away. Sure, he threw himself into coaching alumni games and sharing laughs with old friends at the diner, but there was a gray cloud hanging over his world, one that darkened every joke. Coming from a life fueled by fiery competition, discovery, and now isolation, he couldn't shake the feeling he was losing the fight against time. Then Martha breezed back into his life like a breeze on a scorching July day, ready to pull him back into the land of the living. Vibrant and energetic, she radiated the optimism that had once captivated him, a true nutritionist in every sense. She shared stories of glowing health, current trends, and her unrelenting passion for embracing a better life. The memories sank deep. They'd shared dreams in college, both aspiring to leave their marks on the world. She sat across from him, unease shifting through his mind as they discussed her new project focused on healthy eating. How about we identify 4 incredible carbs that boost longevity? Her enthusiasm drew him in, but it also made him question. The decisions he made now could either mean retribution or redemption. He hesitated, feeling the pressure build within. Should he dive into this health craze at the cost of the traditions that anchored him? What about the hearty biscuits with gravy, the Sunday potlucks filled with comfort food? Memories danced like smoke before him, raising questions about loyalty to the friends who clung to their plates. If he ventured into Martha's world of kale and grain, wouldn't he risk alienating the very crew that had been his family? His unease festered, bubbling as Martha's suggestions began to provoke responses from the diner regulars, igniting an unexpected discussion. Her bright statements fell flat with the roar of opinions from his corner of the booth, long-held beliefs rising like tide. Frank felt himself caught in the churning storm, a wavering loyalty battling with a craving for vitality. An imminent storm was building within the diner, hot coffee and critical voices intermingling as he tried to find his footing on a slippery slope. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos.
And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every moment, he felt a tightening grip of conflict, spinning like a whirlpool around him. The faces of his friends twisted in doubt as they eyed him with uncertainty, their laughter replaced by murmurs. He was once the valiant coach, gilded into glory of championships, but now, could he take the leap towards something he felt such apprehension about? As the din of contrasting beliefs swirled around him, Frank realized the real fight was not just against neglecting his health or losing friendships, but within himself. Could he risk letting go of supportive smiles for the sake of caloric counting? The tension surged, and with it, a harsh truth brewed. Would he allow the journey for health to leave behind a lifetime of connection? The echoes of doubt reverberated in the pit of his stomach, and he steeled himself for a choice that weighed heavy, yet awaited resolution. In the haze of indecision, one question loomed larger than the rest. Did he really want to break free, or did he prefer to remain tethered to the legacy of the past? Frank felt a bead of sweat creep down his forehead as the volume in the diner escalated. Voices rose like a chorus of dissent, a cacophony of laughter and heated opinions clashing against the stark reality of his dilemma. The tension coiled tighter around him, each voice a reminder of the world he felt slipping away. One by one, his friends seemed to turn against Martha, defending their old ways with colorful tales of deep-fried delight and carb-laden memories that defined them. Yet, anchored by the confidence exuding from Martha, a small part of him ignited with curiosity. What if they were wrong? The thought slithered through his mind unnervingly. What if embracing this new trend meant not just a diet change, but a life transformation? He envisioned walking into Benny's not as a weary old coach clinging to nostalgia, but as a newer version of himself, someone bold enough to face down dessert trays and friendly but oppressive debates about gravy. Martha caught his eye, her gaze encouraging. "You're a coach, Frank. You've always been good at seeing potential in others. Why not apply that to yourself?" Her words rang out against the backdrop of clattering plates. It was a challenge, one intended to inspire and provoke reflection. But as she spoke, he couldn't help but wrestle with the discomfort that came with it. Was he really capable of leading the way in this aspect, or was it a distant dream woven into the fabric of his identity? He took a deep breath, the air thick with the aroma of butter and fried bacon. "You're talking about a revolution, Martha, not just for me, but for everyone here."
His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, underscoring the significance of this crossroads. "Yes, exactly that," she affirmed, leaning in closer, her voice lowering conspiratorially as if sharing a secret. "Imagine if you could show them it's possible to embrace change while still holding on to the good memories. We can reinvent our traditions." The allure of possibilities emerged like a ray through dark storm clouds. Could he lead by example, bridging both worlds? It felt risky yet thrilling. But even as hope thrummed softly in his chest, doubt lingered like a ghost. Changing his life meant changing the dynamics with those he loved. It would mean confronting fears not just in his diet, but in the friendships he held dear. In the midst of the chaos, Frank spotted Tom, his lifelong friend, tossing him bewildered glances. The trust that once existed seemed to hang by a thread of pancakes and past promises. It highlighted what a leap it would be, not just for him, but recalibrating all the shared rituals. He could almost hear the echo of the past warning him how people clung tightly to their plates as symbols of friendship. What if they don't follow? What if I'm ostracized? The question swirled relentlessly. Then they were never really friends, a voice within him countered, quietly but firmly. Real friendship can adapt. A resolution began to take shape, yet it was fraught with uncertainty. The stage was set for a showdown between the cocooning warmth of comfort food and the invigorating breeze of renewal seeping through the cracks of his thoughts. Frank stood up, taking a moment to breathe, to let the collective voices fade. A newfound clarity twisted the knots in his stomach into a tight purpose. "All right, Martha," he said finally, confidence building. "Let's outline those incredible carbs." As he turned to face the seated wooden figures of his friends, a pulse raced through him, igniting ambition and doubt alike. Would this be the moment he embraced change and the reactions of those seated nearby? The tension mounted, overshadowing the warmth of camaraderie they all tried to foster. He sensed a ripple threading through the crowd, teetering between hostility and acceptance. This would be a catalyst for something immense. As he opened his mouth to address them, another thought flashed in his mind. Leading meant more than just choosing a path. It meant facing the consequences head-on. The question pressing against the walls of his heart now thundered, demanding attention. Was he ready to behold the unforeseen fallout of his courageous decision? The shuffling wave of anticipation filled the diner as he steeled himself, every heartbeat echoing the imprint of change he yearned for. This was only the beginning. Frank drew in a breath, grounding himself in that moment. The clinking of forks against plates receded into a muted background as he focused on the bright eyes of his closest friends, each one filled with anticipation or skepticism. He could sense the heavy air of tradition weighing down heavily. It reminded him just how pivotal this moment was, not just for him, but for everyone gathered. "Guys,
he began, his voice steadying as he fought against the emotional undercurrent threatening to batter him down. "I know we have some great memories around these tables, bonding over food that has practically defined our friendships over the years." A couple of nods and murmurs rippled through the group, encouraging him to continue. "But I also think it's time we reconsider what that means for our future. You see, memories are important, but they can evolve, just like we do. Martha has shown me that embracing change doesn't mean abandoning what we hold dear." The looks exchanged among his friends seemed complex, a kaleidoscope of concern, curiosity, and disbelief. Frank realized they were wrestling with their own identity amidst his declaration. It was more than a simple shift. It was a negotiation of beliefs deeply woven into their lives. "Today," he pressed on, "I stand ready to pursue a healthier lifestyle, not just for me, but to prove it can be done. I am committed to valuing ourselves beyond the plates we've filled all these years." Experiencing a surge of adrenaline, he gestured towards Martha, who remained steady and unwavering. "Martha has proposed alternatives, incredible carbs that can fit into our lives while still allowing us to honor the spirit of our love for food. Imagine that!" Tom shifted, a frown etched across his brow. "But Frank, you're asking us to give up things we love. What about the pies or the burgers?" His heart raced. These were the defining pillars of their gatherings, meals central to bonding moments and laughter. "It's not about giving up," Frank insisted. "It's about exchanging. Think of it as a trade. The deep-fried food we grew up loving can be replaced with options that honor our health and future. We can keep the memories while evolving the ingredients. Together, we can pave the way for new traditions that still bring us together." A slow murmur began to ripple through the diner. Conversations about food, health, and shared experiences erupted like small-talked fireworks, but confusion and hesitance still clouded the air. "Frank, that's all well and good, but not everyone's going to be on board," a voice piped up from the corner of the booth. It belonged to Angela, another longtime friend. "Some people see change as a threat. They may not just disagree, they might push back hard." His pulse quickened further, anxiety clawing at his chest. She was right. The risk wasn't just standing alone on a different plate. It was losing what he thought he knew about his community. "Then we dialogue," he declared, conviction fueling his words. "Let's discuss openly what we feel and hear out our concerns without judgment." Pausing, he grabbed the edge of the table, feeling the reassuring solidity of its surface.
If we really value our friendship, we can adapt. Change can blend into our existing bonds. It doesn't have to mean starting over. The tension shifted. A ripple of contemplation danced around the table. He could see Martha sharing prideful, optimistic glances at him, urging him forward. Frank nodded assuredly. "Let's give the incredible carbs a chance. What do you say? Can we try new recipes together? Bring our imaginations where our nostalgia used to reside?" A flicker of excitement erupted across some of their faces, but doubt lingered fresh in the air. As eyes darted among each other, grappling with the unfolding challenge of adaptation, he sensed the pivotal crux of transformation. Real friendships would indeed rise or fall depending on how they navigated this crossroads together. But when warm smiles started to emerge, sparks of acceptance beginning to glow in the dim diner light, he glimmered at the intoxicating prospect of breaking ground. Yet the greater question loomed. What if this attempt to bridge change led to discord instead of unified celebration? Looking around, he realized he was at the edge of something much bigger than simply altering his own life. If they were truly to embark on this journey together, he needed to be ready for unexpected resistance, even from those he loved most. In that moment, Frank knew he was prepared to confront the complexities ahead. The stakes were higher than he anticipated. Was he ready to fight for this vision, regardless of the consequences? With gathered friends and a swirling ambiance of uncertainty, he took a deep breath, bracing for the storm ahead. The connection forged through shared challenges might very well unveil new aspects of loyalty he hadn't yet considered. But just then, their supportive murmurs morphed into an unsettling questioning. The question loomed larger than ever. Would their existing bonds withstand the tests of transformation? And what would it mean for Frank if they didn't? The diner atmosphere shifted palpably as Frank's heart raced, sensing both the anticipation and skepticism swirling around him like an unseen tempest. The thrill of taking this step, of pushing the boundaries of comfort, should have felt liberating, yet he was acutely aware of the responses of each friend at the table. He could see flickers of doubt, glances exchanged, lips pressed into tight lines. How deep were these connections, and were they strong enough to withstand the churning waters of change he was stirring? Seizing on the moment, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a more personal cadence. I know this isn't easy. Tradition is hard to shake, and in many ways you're cherishing memories that are irreplaceable. But isn't that the beauty of relationships? They can grow and adapt just like we do. We can make new memories that still honor the old ones.
As he spoke, he felt vulnerability creeping in, a vulnerable space where their shared history was laid bare, yet a steely determination pushed him onward. Frank's intention shifted from defending his stand to leading with empathy, wanting to understand their fears just as much as he was ready to face his own. Well, what if we approach this differently? Frank suggested. Instead of focusing on what we might lose, let's explore what we could gain. I propose a culinary challenge, a cook-off. Let's each present a new recipe that embodies both health and our cherished flavors. Eyes lit up at his words, intrigue mingling with hesitation. Tom raised an eyebrow. And what if your food tastes like cardboard, Frank? How'll that add to the new? A wave of laughter swept through the group, easing some tension while the challenge lingered. Frank chuckled, recognizing the jest, but noting the battle lines subtly drawn. Fair point, Tom. That's where we come together. If something doesn't work, we tweak it. We're in this together, just like we always have been. It's an opportunity to share our creativity and make something even more special. The atmosphere crackled with energetic currents of dialogue, laughter, and skepticism. Frank could sense a tangible shift. He had maneuvered from the solitary tower of his conviction into a collaborative space. The previous anxiety morphed into excitement, and before he knew it, voices began layering over one another, brainstorming potential recipes, reminiscing about family meals transformed by new flavors. Yet amidst the growing camaraderie, a hint of doubt nudged at the corners of Frank's thoughts. What if some friends were simply appeasing him? Would they actually commit to this endeavor, or would it dissolve into meticulously organized plans that never materialized? Angela's calm yet probing voice broke through his musings. Even if you succeed with some recipes, what about the deeper issues? Her eyes sparkled, though there was a storm brewing beneath. What if ultimately this attempt leads to division instead of unity? Frank's insides twisted. If they fail to find joy in their new traditions, what loss would that bring beyond just food? There lay the crux of his challenge, the possibility of disconnecting from his support system in the interest of a healthier lifestyle. Determined to anchor his thoughts in solutions rather than fears, Frank brought the conversation back to the cook-off, discerning personal breakthroughs from hidden insecurities and lost confidences. Let's schedule the cook-off and commit to tasting each other's creations. If it doesn't work, we reassess together. As eyes began to brighten, the shadows of uncertainty still loomed. Were they genuinely invested in this collective leap forward? Would disappointment linger like an unwanted guest at their table if the culinary journey faltered? The moment felt electric with possibilities, each pulse a step into uncharted territory, not just about food, but about genuine, transformative relationships. But they were at a cliff's edge now, and Frank knew that one misstep could plunge them back into the familiarity of the past. Feeling the weight of expectations settle even heavier on his shoulders, he took a breath. Let's embrace this challenge then, but also accept that it's okay to worry. If we can express our concerns openly, we can navigate through this together.
His words hung in the air, both a challenge and an invitation, pressing against the boundaries of long-held beliefs. Would his friends, armed with a mix of resistance and curiosity, rise to this occasion? And so, amid the lively chatter that echoed through the diner, Frank stood at the precipice of potential. The question now was whether the risks involved in this venture of transformation would yield the rewards he desperately desired, or usher in a rift that thrust him into an unfamiliar reality altogether. Who would rise to the occasion, and who would instead shun the change he so fervently sought? The ring of the diner doorbell interrupted Frank's introspective swirl as he left his friends behind and stepped into the brisk chill of the evening. The fresh air filled his lungs, invigorating yet heavy with the weight of the conversation that had taken place inside. For the first time in weeks, excitement and anxiety battled within him on a battlefield of uncertainty. The cook-off was not just a culinary challenge, it was a ripple in the pond of tradition that could either pave the way for harmony or disrupt the painful stillness he'd grown accustomed to. With purposeful strides, he navigated the sidewalk, reflecting on how deep-seated traditions could mold behavior like clay, but also shatter like glass when pressed too hard. He caught his reflection in a nearby window, a caricature of determination juxtaposed against the unyielding forces of nostalgia. Frank felt a surge of desperation to hold on to his friends while pushing them to step beyond their comfort zones. Would they come along for the ride, or would loyalty to the past win out? Arriving home, he flicked on the lights in his modest kitchen, letting the warmth wrap around him. The refrigerator hummed softly, a constant reminder of the culinary delights yet to be explored. Each door opened could lead to temptation or innovation. Vibrant vegetables, wholesome grains, and the remnants of beloved recipes that filled his mind with memories of simpler times at family dinners. Hesitation struck again, icy, as he stood before the open fridge. He felt as if he was standing at the edge of a precipice, ready to leap into an unknown future. Would he be able to impress his friends? More importantly, would he make a recipe that elicited their genuine enjoyment and not just polite smiles?
These questions swirled fervently as he paced, pulling out ingredients and laying them on the countertop with intent. Inspiration flickered, a quinoa salad laced with layers of roasted vegetables and zesty dressing. A perfect fusion to represent the new without stripping away the essence of the familiar. He began dissecting the hesitancy that had clung to him. Wasn't this exactly the kind of dish that could honor their past while inviting the future? As he chopped the bell peppers, vivid colors bursting upon the surface, he sensed a shift within himself. This culinary pursuit was a revelation in itself. Cooking had become his canvas to express transformation. The rhythmic sound of knife against board reflected a burgeoning confidence, one that had been stifled for too long beneath protective layers of uncertainty. In moments of silence, a weight of apprehension crept in again, prodding him to question his motivations. Could this want for collaboration mask a deeper longing for acceptance? Was he ready to confront any fallout should this experiment flop? Would the ensuing disappointment shatter the newfound optimism he'd spun? Yet, for the first time, the potential of failure felt exhilarating rather than daunting. Frank finally realized it wasn't the outcome that mattered, but the journey, his journey, and the courage to forge connections anew, despite the risk of rejection. With every cutting motion, he envisioned not only the flavors, but the laughter and vulnerability that would accompany the shared experience. This was about more than food. It was a test of emotional resilience and the strength of bonds that aligned with his evolving self. Finishing his culinary masterpiece, Frank stepped back to evaluate. The vibrant dish glimmered like a beacon of hope, promising a bold declaration of who he was becoming. Yet, just as a flicker of triumph surged through him, the weight of doubt loomed again. What if he stood alone in this quest? Was he willing to risk the heat of disapproval, tinged with nostalgia's suffocating grip?
he felt his determination harden. This cook-off wasn't merely about recipes. It was his chance to reshape friendships, to redefine himself amidst their collective bewilderment, and perhaps even learn to accept the multitude of opinions that would arise. With renewed fervor carrying him into the night, he put the dish into the refrigerator, knowing the journey ahead held more than culinary stakes. And as Frank finally settled into bed, drifting into sleep, a thought flitted through his mind. Perhaps the most daunting revelation would come not from his friends' reactions to their newly cooked meals, but rather from the realization that he was ready to embrace his own identity, flavors and all, regardless of the outcome. In the dim light of dawn the next morning, a new day awaited, and Frank would soon discover not just who was with him, but what he was truly capable of when the time had come to face the plate of reality.
The sun crested the horizon, bathing Frank's kitchen in a warm, golden light. He woke with a clenched stomach and a racing mind. The unfamiliar thrill of possibility tinged his heart. Today was critical. Today, he would confront not just the cook-off, but the fears that lingered like shadows in the corners of his mind. As he prepared for the day, a flurry of thoughts bombarded him. Each dish he created, each flavor he combined, would echo loudly in the minds of his friends. They'd laugh, they'd critique, and there was no escaping their judgment. But as he stood at the sink, washing his hands, he caught sight of his reflection once again. This time, it was imbued with a sense of purpose, a man ready to discover the layers of himself he had kept hidden for too long. With a deep breath, Frank mapped out the day's strategy. He needed to present his dish with confidence. After all, he was no longer simply following recipes. He was crafting a narrative, a bridge from the past to the present. Embracing this idea lent itself as a powerful mantra. He would describe the significance of each ingredient, how they connected to shared memories, while also pushing boundaries into unexplored territory. Each flavor a storytelling device, a dance between nostalgia and innovation. He returned to his refrigerator, gazing at the vibrant quinoa salad, now an emblem of the journey he was on. But as he prepped for the cook-off, doubt crept back in. What if his idea went unnoticed? What if those cherished moments he sought to recreate only stoked the fire of their nostalgia, igniting an overwhelming resistance against change? The question dug deeper. Would his willingness to evolve put him at odds with those he cared about? The fear of rejection loomed heavy, yet he also sensed something deeper stirring within: conviction. He would not allow his apprehensions to dictate his actions. What Frank didn't realize was that each challenge he set forth would begin unraveling his potential. With that realization came a decision. He would embrace openness and acceptance, not just from his friends, but for himself. Stepping out of his apartment, the crisp air invigorated him. Along the way, he rehearsed his pitch for the dish, mapping the emotional terrain he hoped to navigate with his friends. It was more than explaining flavors. It was about sharing a fragment of himself. The moment of truth loomed closer, igniting both anticipation and anxiety within him. Upon arriving at the courtyard where the cook-off would unfold, the frenetic energy in the air stirred his excitement. The vibrant clamor of laughter and friendly banter echoed around him, yet beneath it a current of tension hummed. He could sense the scrutiny from eyes fixed on him as he unloaded his quinoa dish. Was this the moment he'd feared, the moment they continued prioritizing tradition over evolving tastes? As he prepared his station, the realities of what was at stake pressed in from all sides.
Friends he had known for years were hungry for connection, but would they be able to taste the vision he held for their future? Or would they be unwilling to embrace that which was unfamiliar, pouring honey over nostalgia rather than daring to savor something new? Collecting his thoughts, he realized the verdict did not rest solely on the culinary merits of his dish. It lay heavily on his shoulders, in his ability to present not just food, but a path towards mutual growth and understanding. Gathering his courage, he took a deep, centering breath, feeling the weight of anticipation as he moved amongst his friends. Just as he began to share his heart, his culinary philosophy, a voice pierced through the laughter. It was Brian, a friend known for his steadfast loyalty to tradition. "What's this?" he questioned, eyebrows raised, challenging the vibrancy of Frank's dish with an air of skepticism. The moment of truth arrived, not just for the dish, but for Frank himself. Would he defend his vision boldly, or would fear and nostalgia entangle him? As the cook-off progressed, Frank steeled himself for the upcoming confrontation, knowing that he was not just serving food, but also testing the bonds of acceptance and change that could either solidify or fray. The heat from the cook-off radiated through the courtyard as Frank stared into the faces of his friends, each one a mix of eager curiosity and skepticism. He felt a knot tightening in his stomach as Brian's challenge echoed in his mind. Frank's dish was more than just food. It represented a bold step into an unknown future, and he could sense the potential for conflict brewing. Once again, he found himself caught in a whirlwind of vulnerability and determination. Defending his creation meant exposing parts of himself that he had long buried. Would they appreciate his vision, or would their attachments to expectations lead to rejection? He had always operated within the confines of their opinions, often letting his voice fall silent in the face of discord. But today was different. Today he had to speak up, not just for his quinoa salad, but for the man he was striving to become. With a deliberate breath, he positioned himself before his friends. "This dish," he started, "is a celebration of evolution, personal and culinary." He looked around, scanning the faces for signs of disinterest. There were a few smirks, some narrowed eyes, but he pressed on. The ingredients each carry a story. The quinoa isn't just a grain, it represents resilience and adaptability, just like my journey in the kitchen and in life. The moment felt electric. Frank's voice, once shaky and tentative, carried strength as he gamely shared snippets of memories tied to each ingredient. The cherry tomatoes spoke of summer picnics, the mint of his grandmother's garden, and the feta cheese was a nod to his travels abroad. "I want to show you that change isn't something to fear. It can be a beautiful thing," he declared, his heart racing with both the thrill of vulnerability and the dread of skeptics. Brian folded his arms, tilting his head in contemplation. "But what's wrong with tradition? Isn't that what makes these gatherings special?" The room quieted, all eyes trained on Frank, awaiting his response. He felt the weight of consensus, a collective defense of the past, tempting him to back down. His mind whirred. A flicker of frustration ignited a shift within him. "Tradition is important, Brian, but there's also joy in transformation. We evolve, our tastes change, we carry memories forward, not by clinging to them, but through new experiences. I want this cook-off to be a chance to create new ones." The challenge emerged in his voice as he diverged from the safety of pacifying quirks. He could see the wheels turning in Brian's mind, concern mingling with intrigue. Perhaps his appeal, fervently laced with genuine emotion, was beginning to resonate. But Frank knew that change was rarely embraced without a fight. He would need to hold his ground amidst potential backlash. As conversations roiled around him, he sensed an opportunity to influence not just their palates, but their perspectives. Would they allow the shift to root, or would this simply hurt their intimacy etched in time? Each question ignited fear, yet sparked a surge of determination. Frank realized he was not just fighting against nostalgia, he was also leading with honesty, sharing his own evolving preferences and aspirations. Stepping back, he felt a surge of empowerment. He no longer sought validation. This was about sharing, about forging connections through culinary exploration. As he dished out samples, anticipation surged with every hesitant bite. But in that pivotal moment, he couldn't shake what loomed across the courtyard, a new figure, a shadow of doubt. And it was none other than Lisa, a fellow cook whose impeccable skill set revolved around classic culinary arts. As she wove through the crowd, her gaze scrutinized him, brimming with competitive spirit and a hint of disdain that left him unsettled. The stage was set for an unexpected challenge. Frank's journey was evolving through each bite, yet he found himself grappling with the prospect of multiple battles in a single day. He would need to fortify himself against both his friends' expectations and the looming threat of an opponent. Time to confront not just tradition, but the very foundation of his culinary dreams. As he prepared for yet another reckoning, a thought resonated powerfully. Could he navigate this tricky terrain, or would he become ensnared in the very nostalgia he sought to redefine? The tension in the air thickened as Lisa made her approach. Frank felt an instinctual surge of defensiveness, his heart thrumming in his chest like the steady pulse of a warning drum.
He had known Lisa for years, a culinary powerhouse who wielded tradition like a shield. Her commitment to classic techniques was unwavering, and in that moment, it felt as if she represented the essence of everything he was attempting to challenge. As she took her place in front of him, her cool composure contrasted sharply with Frank's fervent emotional state. "So, Frank, you think you've reinvented the wheel with quinoa?" she quipped, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "What happened to the flavors that have stood the test of time?" The question lingered in the air between them, sharp and accusatory. Each word pierced through his resolve. He could feel the weight of his own vulnerabilities hanging heavily on his shoulders. Frank took a deep breath, reminding himself of the purpose behind his dish. It wasn't just about food. It was about redefining what a gathering could be, about allowing room for evolution without discarding the past. "Lisa," he replied, meeting her gaze with newfound determination, "I'm not trying to dismiss tradition. I think there's room for both innovation and heritage. We can honor the past while inviting change. Isn't that what we're all trying to do in our lives?" The silence that followed felt like a battlefield, each unspoken thought hanging between them, begging for resolution. Frank prepared himself for her next volley, drawing strength from the courage he had just unearthed. Yet the prospect of a public confrontation provoked fear within him, a familiar refrain that echoed in his mind. What if he failed? But the flicker of resolve ignited within him again. The truth was, failure was part of this journey. After all, every dish he created bore his mark, his evolution as both a cook and an individual, and for the first time he considered that perhaps he had more to prove than just culinary prowess. He was carving out a place in a world where he had often felt inconsequential, trapped by others' standards. "I want to elevate the dish by infusing it with personal narratives and new influences," he said, his voice steadying. "I'm here not to compete with classics, but to celebrate how fluid our culinary landscape can be." Lisa arched an eyebrow, interested but still guarded. It was a spark of engagement, a crack in the wall she had built around her devotion to traditional cuisine. Frank recognized that opening. He could not only influence opinions, but perhaps reshape perceptions about balance and respect for both culinary worlds. If he could navigate these waters, he'd have much more than just a dish. He'd achieve a personal breakthrough. The heat from the cook-off seemed to intensify, each moment carrying with it the weight of critical expectations, not just from his friends, but now with the palpable pressure of standing up to Lisa's authority in the kitchen. The crowd's eyes shifted between them, their murmurs vibrating through the air.
Frank's hand trembled slightly as he plated another sample, but he steadied himself, embracing the exhilaration mixed with dread. For every bite, he offered a story, threading through personal experiences that painted his journey of transformation. With every taste, he felt the embers of anticipation build, not just for approval, but for affirmation of his identity. Yet just as he began to notice nods of intrigue and curiosity among his friends, Lisa turned the focus back on him. So, if all this storytelling matters, then why don't you tell us about the heart of it? What do you hope your food achieves beyond a fleeting experience? The challenge was sharper this time, and it struck at the core of his motivation. The question bore down on him, demanding a deeper reflection. What did he hope his culinary journey would achieve? This was no longer just about flavor pairings. It asked him to confront the purpose of his passion and the authenticity behind his creations. As he pondered this deeper question, Frank felt the pressure mounting, the realization dawning that every bite he presented was a reflection of his ambitions, his fears, and a stark confrontation with his legacy. It was a moment demanding clarity and self-discovery. Yet lurking in the back of his mind was the undeniable truth: he was just beginning to understand the true essence of his culinary voice. As the crowd waited for his response, the stakes felt higher than ever. Would he step into this vulnerable space, truly allowing his vision to unfold, or would he retreat back into the complacency of the familiar? Determination surged through him. It was now or never. He could choose to carry this conversation into a layer of authenticity he had never fully embraced. With every heartbeat, the tension grew. Would he define the narrative, or let his insecurities dictate his response? Time froze as he opened his mouth, ready to reveal not just how cooking was an act of artistry, but also a profound expression of connection. The answer that could change everything. Frank felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he opened his mouth, every heartbeat amplifying the noise in his head. It was a fragile space where his thoughts collided with the expectations of the audience. Would they understand what he was trying to convey? Would he be brave enough to articulate the essence hidden within his culinary creations? "The heart of my food," he began, his voice shaky but growing stronger with each word, "is about more than just nourishment. It's about storytelling. Every recipe carries a history, not just of the ingredients, but of the people who've inspired me and the experiences that have shaped my journey." His gaze roamed over the faces in the crowd, seeking connection, a moment of shared understanding. He took a breath, steadying himself. "When I cook, I'm not just following a recipe, I'm channeling my dreams and anxieties, the celebrations and losses that have formed who I am."
Food is the common thread that can bind us, revealing our shared humanity while respecting the differences that make us unique. As soon as the last words left his lips, he felt a shift in the atmosphere. Lisa's expression softened, her previous bravado now intersected with curiosity. Yet a flicker of doubt spurred at the back of Frank's mind. Would his explanation resonate? Could this approach shift perceptions in favor of his innovative culinary vision? And what if it fails? That nagging voice whispered again, reminding him of past disappointments and near misses. But this time, Frank intensified his resolve. He wouldn't let fear dictate his narrative. And so he further elaborated. "My dish is a celebration of flavors that others may overlook. Yes, quinoa is unconventional in certain circles, but it's a vehicle for a deeper message. It's about embracing change while honoring the stories that came before." The murmurs of the audience deepened, oscillating between disbelief and intrigue. Frank's heart raced. He could sense the gears turning in Lisa's mind, the internal wrestling as she considered his words. Here was an opportunity. Could he engage her intellect, peel back some layers of her rigidity? "Frank," Lisa interjected, the challenge returning, yet this time it was tempered with something more thoughtful. "Doesn't your dependency on personal narratives risk alienating the core of the culinary experience? At what point do you cross the line between innovation and oversight?" Her question struck deeper than he anticipated. It laid bare the very tension that had defined his culinary journey, the balance between respecting tradition and pushing the limits of creativity. He realized she wasn't just opposing him, she was testing the foundation of his commitment. Did he want to carve a new path, or was he just flailing in uncertainty? A sudden urge surged through him. He had the chance to cement his belief and confront this challenge head-on. "Perhaps," he started, voice steady, "the beauty of cooking lies in its evolvement. Tradition provides structure, yes, but growth is birthed from exploration. If I restricted my creative impulses to only what is familiar, how would I ever discover new expressions? Isn't that an oversight in itself?" Silence enveloped the area, thick with contemplation. Frank noticed Lisa's brows furrow, her mind processing the implications of his words. He realized that this was no longer just a culinary exchange. It was a personal confrontation, a moment of both vulnerability and power. Whatever the outcome, he felt the shift within himself. His commitment to authenticity overshadowed his fear of failure. As he prepared to respond further, crafting the next layer of his argument, he caught a glimpse of the crowd. They were hanging on his every word, some nodding in recognition, others still wrestling with the concept he was presenting. What he saw in their eyes fueled a fire within him. This was about more than validation.
This was about redefining the essence of what it meant to create, to connect through food. With a new sense of urgency, he leaned forward, eager to dive deeper. But as he opened his mouth once more, he noticed Lisa regain her composure, primed to respond. The dynamic had shifted, and suddenly they were no longer just participants in a culinary face-off. They were collaborators in a deeper dialogue. But would their exchange result in mutual respect or further division? As he sensed the pivot toward a critical moment in this evolving narrative, Frank understood that he hadn't just stepped into a confrontation, but rather a crucible of transformation, one that could either forge new paths or break apart under pressure. Time seemed to slow, and he braced himself, realizing that the true question remained unanswered. What legacy would he carve, and would it truly resonate? As the crowd held its breath, Frank prepared for Lisa's response, knowing that whatever came next would irrevocably alter not only his culinary journey, but his understanding of himself as a creator. The moment hung thick in the air as Frank steadied himself, sensing both the weight of expectation and the flutter of anticipation coursing through him. Lisa shifted, ready to engage, but the tide of voices around them had quieted, eager to witness how this standoff would unfold. Lisa stared intently at him, her expression a mix of contemplation and skepticism. "Frank, I get that you want to evolve our approach to food, but can this really lead us to a greater understanding? Isn't there a risk that by pushing boundaries too much, we lose what food has always represented, a shared experience steeped in tradition?" Frank felt the peering eyes of the crowd, and a jolt of energy surged through him. This wasn't just about defending his beliefs. It was a chance to advocate for change, a chance to address the deeper fears swirling in the air. Food, Lisa, is a living thing. It evolves just like us. Isn't that the beauty of it? Think about how many iconic dishes have changed over generations. We retain their essence while inviting recalibration. We're not tearing down what's sacred, we're expanding our horizons. A ripple of agreement cascaded through a few members of his audience, and Frank seized that momentum. We can honor our past while daring to explore new landscapes. I want us to share not just flavors, but stories that spark discussion and deeper connections. Lisa's tight expression softened slightly. "So, show us, Frank. Prove to me that this new direction can resonate with everyone here, not just the adventurous eaters, but those who cherish the comfort of classic dishes." His pulse quickened. This was a challenge, a gladiatorial arena where he could showcase not just his dish, but the reasoning behind it. "All right," he said, fixing her with a determined gaze. "Let's embrace a fusion of past and present."
After the cook-off, I invite you and the others to join me in creating a dish that embodies tradition while weaving in contemporary elements. Each of us can contribute a favorite ingredient, old and new. Let's see if we can find harmony amongst the chaos. There it was, an open hand extending towards unity. The atmosphere shifted palpably as whispers of curiosity bubbled through the crowd. If he could steer this confrontation into an inclusive collaboration, it might lay the groundwork for something far more significant than a cook-off. "Do you think I'd just let you off that easily?" Lisa teased lightly, yet with lingering challenge in her eyes. "This meal you've created still needs to impress, or you could lose me on principle alone. Just because you've stepped into your own doesn't mean everyone else will automatically follow." Frank nodded, acknowledging the stakes with earnestness. "I welcome the challenge, Lisa. I believe in sharing stories through dishes, even if they taste subpar to some. Your criticism only helps me grow. That's the core of culinary art. And it's also at the heart of friendship and community. Understanding that every iteration, every recipe can spark evolution as long as we remain open to learning from one another." The realization surged within him as the surrounding faces shifted. People were leaning in, no longer spectators, but participants. Each one held stories of their own, experiences interwoven with flavors, waiting to be voiced. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the corner. "What if we don't like your dish, Frank?" It was Angela, her tone laced with playful skepticism. "You know we've got certain standards around here." Laughing, Frank took that moment to feel the pulsing beat of camaraderie surrounding him. "Then we'll cook again. This is a journey, not a destination. Our tastes and friendships can remain vibrant. They don't need to conform to rigid definitions. Let's find a way that meets us all halfway. Together, we can create a tapestry of flavors that embraces both our past and our growth." Encouraged by this newfound openness, murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. Laughter fluttered freely as faces sparked with laughter and renewed interest, while Frank could feel the barriers softening around the table. Perhaps this idea he'd had wasn't merely naive or reckless after all. Lisa shot him a sideways glance, a hint of appreciation flickering in her eyes. "All right, I'm in then. Let's see what you really got," she conceded, nodding thoughtfully. The moment blossomed, the collective will shifted, and the tenor of the cook-off changed. No longer merely a competition, but a platform for sharing personal narratives, experimenting, and forging connections beyond the dishes presented. What once threatened to be a cauldron of opposition now shimmered with collaborative potential. As the crowd descended upon his quinoa salad, tastes met intrigue, and Frank felt a swell of pride. Each bite was not just a mere testing of flavors, but a step into a collective journey towards openness and growth. Laughter erupted. Friends teasing yet openly reflecting on their experiences lent an air of lightheartedness to the affair. It began to dawn on Frank that transformation was not just born in isolation, but through collaboration. Their togetherness solidified his courage, showing that it was possible for old flavors to coexist with new experiences, just as he himself could thrive within this tight-knit circle with whom he had grown up. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just cooking to impress, he was weaving bonds that could withstand the volleys of doubt while embracing the spices of change. As laughter burst forth, dialogue and stories flowed like sweet syrup over pancakes, remixing personal values into a culinary celebration. By evening's end, Frank knew he had transcended the fight he had felt was bearing down on him for so long. He'd not only confronted his fears, but had embraced his identity as both a creator and a self. And as he shared stories with friends across the table, he felt a deep-seated sense of contentment, a holistic celebration of food that now encapsulated each of their life experiences, past and present. The cook-off had been a pivotal moment, not just as a culinary challenge, but as a reminder that deep connections could be forged through shared experiences and mutual understanding. Everything had shifted, and in its wake, Frank basked in the warmth of accomplishment, surrounded by uplifting friendships that felt renewed and fortified against the tides of change. This was his metamorphosis, a profound realization that within each serve of food laid the potential for connection. Now emboldened, he had risen to the challenge, crafted new narratives, and fully embraced the intricate layers of himself. And just like that, he had learned that true nourishment transcended the plate.
It flourished in the courage to evolve alongside the relationships that defined their gatherings of love and support. As he stepped back, surveying the scene, a sense of solid confidence settled deep in his chest, a recognition of his worth both as a chef and as a friend. The journey was just beginning, but here, amidst laughter and camaraderie, Frank felt the clarity of purpose entrenched in every bite shared. Transformation was possible, and it began with him. And now was the moment for others to join in too. If you've been inspired by Frank's journey of transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to stay tuned for more exclusive emotional stories that reshape lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more individuals seeking change. This is the moment to show your support. Comment below with your reactions and insights about Frank's evolution, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who can benefit from embracing their personal transformations.
Don't wait even one more second. Step into the journey with us.